the biggest barrier to mental health is shame, right? It's like you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to be open about it. So in my head it was just like, what if I just put it all online? What do I have to be ashamed of? And then I just started like talking about like what I'd gone through, and then
I've never heard anyone break down OCD in such a digestible way.
Oh, thank you.
And this is why Zack is on the podcast, because hello and welcome to the People First podcast, the Young Careers podcast. I'm your host Jordan, and today we're going to be discussing destigmatizing mental health in the workplace. I am joined by my lovely guest today, Zoe Mallett, happiness consultant. I've met Zoe before, we spoke on the podcast, and I'm really excited to have you back again. And we've got Zack Tucker, who is an account coordinator at Brook Street.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me back.
I would have you back in every episode, Zoe, so I would.
Love that.
So just first of all, I'll maybe come to you, Zack. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about yourself, what you do in the company and outside of it?
Sure. So I'm Zack. I'm from Cardiff in Wales. I don't really have an accent to go with it, but
I feel like you do. I feel like you have a little twang.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I feel like the twang's there.
Good. Okay, that's what I want to hear. But yeah, I'm an accounts coordinator for Brook Street in public sector. But then outside of work, I run a mental health page, basically where I destigmatize OCD and kind of just other mental health disorders as well. Just trying to break down the narrative around them.
Great. And for the listeners, me and Zack actually know each other quite well. Zack has been my mentee, I would say, at work for maybe the last 9 months, which has sort of turned into some reverse mentoring, I would say. But Zack, I think I know this, but would you tell listeners what your first ever job was?
Well, my first ever job was Burger King.
Okay, great.
I love that.
I was on $3.60 an hour.
Nice.
For 2 years I was on drive-through. It made me who I am, but I did hate it.
I feel like those jobs do. I was actually saying this the other day. Like those jobs, like build such an important part of your character.
Yeah. Make it compulsory to work in hospitality. That's what I say.
That's it. It has to be hospitality as well.
Hospitality or in a call centre is like absolutely my two go-tos. I can't entertain anyone. And Zoe, we met last season. Thank you so much for coming back. What have you been up to? I keep up with you probably to the dot, so I know, but can you please tell our listeners some new things that you've been up to since we last spoke?
Yeah, so I have been continuing my work as a happiness consultant, working with businesses. And at the moment I'm working with Refi, which is a beauty brand, and I love working with them. I've loved working with them over the last few months. That is everything to do with their people, culture and HR strategies internally. And then I also have been continuing making content where I help people understand how their mind works and show people how they can be a bit happier in life. And I've recently started a walking club called City Days, which is a conscious walking club to help people connect with themselves, others, and the city.
Love that. And I'm very, very, very keen to attend. So probably just to dive straight in.
Let's do it.
When we talk about mental health, right, the umbrella term that it is, what do we mean by sexy versus unsexy mental illness?
I feel like the like palatable mental health, like I guess like I don't know. I suppose like things like ADHD or depression have become quite like sexy, I suppose, and like on like social media especially. I think, you know, as a quite a culture of diagnosing yourself a lot based on very like I guess limited information, and then so just like it's just the very palatable things to talk about that. But when you kind of delve into things like I don't know schizophrenia or like self-harm or suicide, then people are a bit more like, oh, I didn't, you know. So you say, how are you? And someone actually tells you and they're like, oh, I don't actually want to know that much. But
yeah, no, that makes sense. I don't know if you would have anything to add on that.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like sexy mental health is when it's romanticized.
Yeah.
But you also see it in films, right? Like you've got characters in films who have depression or who have anxiety, but they're geniuses or they're creative masterminds, or there's like a love story, but something's getting in the way of them connecting because one of them is depressed or anxious, and that love story is never going to really come together. So I feel like it's romanticized a lot on social media and within like films and TV as well. And it's that visually pleasing aesthetic of, I'm not feeling great, but I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, I agree. And you've touched on something that I wanted to speak about in terms of TV and film. Like my first introduction to schizophrenia on TV was in Hollyoaks back in the day. And I can't remember if you remember the storyline. I can't remember the character's name, but he was probably, what do you imagine a dictionary definition of a schizophrenic to be like? You know, they were seeing visions and hurting people and voices in their heads. And I think that was probably maybe a hindrance to me because I had never seen that before and then didn't know what to expect from that. So I think a lot of us are introduced to these, you know, a lot of us are introduced to mental health or sort of syndromes and things like that through TV and film, and it might be quite harmful too.
Yeah, and I think that you're right in terms of that unsexy mental health is those disorders like schizophrenia, like bipolar, the like severe depression, which still holds quite a heavy stigma to it, and that is when it's seen as unsexy to people because that stigma is still attached to it. And I feel that then when people are seeing that type of unsexy mental health online, because there is a weakness attached to that, or there's not very much hope attached to it, people don't find it as attractive to interact with it.
I think it's like a lot of the kind of like things that can be really like resolved with like self-care, kind of, you know, like have a self-care day, like, you know, put on a face mask and like
do some Ricky.
Like, you know, just very like, I guess just I keep going back to the palatable, just like easy to digest, not too, you don't need to ask too many questions, I suppose, about it is what I'd say.
Yeah, I know. And
relatable, I think.
Yeah, relatable as well. Really good point. And mental health awareness is, for the better, I guess, increased dramatically in recent years. We're talking about it at a corporate level. People like ourselves are being more vocal about it on social media. But do you think the way that it is being discussed now is problematic?
I think there's a mix. I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's obviously really cool that mental health is being discussed. Like it never has been the way it is, but I suppose just mixed with like how social media, it just, I guess it matters how social media regulates that, and just gives people, I guess, too much scope to diagnose themselves. So, and I think which is what we're seeing now, especially in younger people. I think that. I don't know. I think I'm always going to be pro the fact that it's being talked about. And I think just a natural kind of fallout of that is just something, I don't know. I just think that's all inevitable, that people will just self-diagnose and that sort of thing. But I think the crux is that people are speaking about it, and that's actually what matters.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's fantastic that we're all having more of an open conversation about it. I feel like the dangerous parts of it, though, is when then it is categorized as that sexy or unsexy. And, you know, you could say that the sexy version is where we can kind of tap in and maybe tap out of it. But then the unsexy, when you are suffering from bipolar, severe depression, schizophrenia, severe anxiety, you can't just tap in and out of it if you go to a Reiki class or if you eat healthily for a week. Like, they live lives where this is their norm.
Yeah, of course.
So I feel like we have to be, we just have to remain sensitive about everybody that's experiencing mental health.
I actually find, so full disclosure, I've like diagnosed anxiety and depression since I was probably about 14, 15, and I've been treated medically from that age. So I, through life, have never enjoyed anyone trying to treat me or tell me that I should not be on medication. You know, those beta blockers keep me going through the day. But I then feel now that I'm more conscious about asking people questions or really being nosy if anyone else is telling me that they are doing something, because I don't want to give an opinion that would upset someone else, because I feel like people have told me to just go on a long walk and things like that before, and I think you feel less. It almost like has made me like retract whenever it comes to those conversations, because I just wouldn't want anyone to be offended or anything like that, because as much as we're like aware, we're not all experts in the field, but something like OCD, for example, which is, I would say, quite misunderstood.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Massively misunderstood.
Massively misunderstood is something that, I've heard people say that they have OCD very colloquially. Is that the word? Just like as a passing comment in the workplace. And how would that make you feel,
Well, I think when having OCD and experiencing it, and actually experiencing how severe and how like this OCD nearly killed me.
Yeah.
So when you're I'm in work and someone's like, oh my gosh, my files, like they're like I get so OCD about my files, it just really trivializes it. And I think that not only does it like there's so many effects of that. Like one, you're stopping people from opening up. Like if there's someone suffering in silence who's maybe not opened up about their OCD or doesn't want to, and there's everyone in the office just saying it as if it's this very, very trivial thing, then they're not going to want to open up about it. And also on the other side of that, people who don't know they have OCD will struggle to get a diagnosis as a result, because if it's something that everyone has, then how are you supposed to know when you actually have OCD, which is like intrusive thoughts and that sort of aspect of it, then it's just becomes so much harder to diagnose.
Yeah. And just to bring it back a little bit, if you were explaining to someone who was completely unaware, what would you say is the difference between having OCD tendencies and living with full OCD,
Yeah. So OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. And it basically, people get, when people are talking about like having OCD, like, oh yeah, I need to move this cup, like, I need my files neat. They understand the very like shallow aspect of it. But the reason that people are cleanly is not because they like things being clean. There's nothing enjoyable about having OCD. It's I need to switch this light on and off 3 times or my mum will die.
Yeah.
If I don't do that, then everything will end. My life is over. Like for me, when I was younger, when it first hit me, it was waking up after a night out. And this thought that just came into my head, which was like, well, what if you killed someone on a night out last night and you can't remember? And I just became obsessed with it. I was like, wait, well, how can I know? I blacked out. There's missing parts of my night that I can't remember. What if the police are coming to get me now? Just completely. And then that was like 24/7. I didn't have a break from that thought.
Yeah.
I'd say like out of a minute, 50 seconds of that minute would be like this spiral, like constant, like 24/7. Just like, what if you did this? Or like, not even just that. Like it would, the theme would switch. It'd be like, well, what if you fancy your rabbit, or like, like silly things, just completely irrational thoughts. And what OCD is it's the word that you say is ego dystonic. So that is the opposite of your values. So. Someone, for example, there might be someone who wants to be a teacher. They want to work with kids when they're older. But if you have OCD, then your brain will attach to that and be like, well, why do you want to work with kids? The only reason you'd want to work with kids is because you must be a pedophile. Rather than and then that person freaks out and they're like, they're terrified. They're like, oh my gosh, I can never. And then you suddenly become unable to look at kids. So that's what the obsession is. So the obsession is like, what if I am? And then the compulsion is, how do I reduce the anxiety?
Right. Okay.
And there's ways. If I clean this 5 times, then that reduces the anxiety. Or if I avoid this, then that won't happen. But it's just it's a toxic, destructive cycle that you just get stuck in, and it kills people. It has one of the highest suicide rates of any disorder, highest rates of drug abuse. So when people are saying it and I know that people aren't saying it with malice intent.
No,
like
of course,
it's absolute.
not.
It's ignorance, and like, it doesn't help when you have people like Khloe Kardashian, for example, who has a cleaning show called Clo CD, where she arranges her cookies in nice little jars and that sort of thing. But
she's not living with like debilitating
no,
intrusive thoughts.
It's endemic. It's like about 300 million people in the world actually have diagnosed OCD or diagnosable OCD. So it really, the language around it is so important to make sure that we're really, really helping people.
I feel like I've never heard anyone break down OCD in such a digestible way.
Oh, thank you.
And this is why Zack is on the podcast, because I wanted Zack on here because whenever we first met, I couldn't believe, because do you want to just give a little bit of how OCD stigmatized came about?
Yeah, sure. So I was in uni. So at this point, I'd been having OCD for about 5 years. A lot of that diagnosed because, again, this is the problem. It took me so long to get diagnosed. And just a quick point. It takes 7 to 14 years on average to get an OCD diagnosis right now because of how bad the information around it is. But yeah, so it took me a while, and then I going through a lot of themes, so many different themes. And then in uni, I got into my fourth year of uni, and I was just like, the biggest barrier to mental health is shame, right? It's like you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to be open about it. So in my head, it was just like, what if I just put it all online? What do I have to be ashamed of? And then I just started like talking about like what I'd gone through, and then suddenly people were responding to me and being like, "Oh, me too." And I was like, "Oh, there's people out there." And then it just kind of went from there, and now it's turned into this like page that's been featured in like newspapers and stuff, which is really, really cool, and like I don't take that for granted.
Yeah, you should be so proud of yourself, so proud of yourself. And the reason I like it is because the content is relatable and down to earth, and you touch upon things in a humorous way. Me and Zack are both openly gay men, and a lot going back to that shame point. I remember you made a post about fixating on having HIV after every time you had a sexual partner. That is something I do often as well. It's the fixation on the shame, and I think that idea of shame sort of underpins all of this. Whenever it comes to mental health, and it's nice that you are rationalizing that in online, and bringing that to people.
I think it's really helped me just as a person anyway. Like, I don't know, just made me a much more confident person now that thousands of people online just know my business. So
and that leads me on to my next point. Has there ever been and actually probably a question for both of you, to be honest, has there ever really been a time where you have felt exposed talking so openly about these things that you care about and these like important matters?
I feel like with certain experiences that I've had in life, when they haven't been directly, it hasn't been directly my story, I've just been affected by that story. And I don't want to talk in code, but so my mum was an alcoholic, and that affected me massively. And I haven't had shame talking about it at all, because my mum talks about it openly, I talk about it openly, but it does. I want to touch on that because it's a massive part of my life, and it really, really shaped me. And I want to talk about that more, but part of me doesn't want to because it involves somebody else that I care and love about.
Sure, 100%.
And I think that we can all be affected by other people that experience really severe mental health, and you're a part of that journey, and you actually can become quite mentally ill because of that.
Yeah.
But you can't openly share it because you feel like it's not your story. And
yeah,
it's my mum, I want to protect her. I feel like that's the only time where I haven't. I think when I was younger, I feel that I would feel quite anxious because I was dyslexic, but I didn't know I was dyslexic. Yeah. So I had a lot of anxiety around just being stupid because I just thought I was stupid. And I didn't like talking about that.
Yeah.
I didn't like talking about the fact that I was anxious because I didn't know how to read properly, or I didn't, remember in class and like they'd go around and you'd have to like read
a line. Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh my, this is like my idea of hell.
And that goes back again. It's the shame, it's the dread, isn't it?
Yeah. So I used to like try and practice. I used to try and count and be like, okay, I'm going to have to read these lines. So I used to try and practice, and I couldn't do it. And then I just become really naughty in school. I'd just be like, I'm not reading that. And I did want to read it, but I was too embarrassed, and the shame of me reading it out. So then I'd be really naughty, then I'd be kicked out of class, and then I'd feel anxious about that. And that's something that over the years it's got a lot better. Like, I'm openly like talk about being dyslexic, and I talk about it in the workplace, and I talk about it with friends and relationships and family.
Yeah.
I think those are the two key parts.
Yeah, of course. And again, coming to you, with the businesses that you work with and the companies that you work with, how receptive do you think there's a scale in terms of how willing companies or corporate businesses are willing to talk about mental illness and mental health?
Yeah, I would say that where where the businesses that are most interested in my work and what I do are female founded businesses.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that male owned businesses don't care, because I know that they do. However, the people that the businesses that I'm getting hired for and really want to have these conversations and want to understand about how I bring psychology and culture and happiness together within the workplace, the ones that I get the most bite from are female founders.
Yeah.
And I actually was thinking about this while you were talking, because we talk about mental health in the workplace, but what do we actually really talk about? We talk about anxiety and depression. I've never had people openly talk about OCD as an actual disorder within businesses, schizophrenia, bipolar, right? So I think we're opening up that question within businesses, but I feel like we're very much centered on anxiety, depression, like low mood.
Low mood.
That's ultimately where the focus is. The focus isn't on all of the other disorders that sit under mental health.
Yeah.
And maybe, we have to start having those conversations to be able to open that up. But I don't maybe think we're as far on as we think we are. Because if you're in the world of mental health, or you have a mental illness that isn't one that is the most widely spoken about, then you're sat there and you're thinking, well, I have OCD and nobody's ever mentioned that to me in work.
Yeah, I completely get you. It's almost like those low mood disorders are more palatable to talk about, and I mean, I feel really grateful in like my team structure that I could definitely talk to my managers about how I was feeling or if I was going through a hard time, but I still you hold a bit back, I don't want to scare you or anything like that. I'm telling you that I'm maybe struggling a little bit, but there's obviously a barrier to that, and it's funny that you mentioned the people that you work with you the most are usually female founders. Like, I've followed Jess Hunt for probably since I was 18, right? She probably was a faceless influencer to me. I saw her launch the brand and those sorts of things. And when I saw that she was working with you, that made me like her 10 times more, because it's a business, obviously, that you can tell invests in their people. That sometimes we can't even get sometimes we can't get people in like good HR in a company, right? Like good pastoral care, let alone a business that actually proactively wants to make sure that their staff are happy and that the culture is thriving, And I know, not to point a mirror at you or anything, but I think that's just a really wonderful thing, that you make people feel like that and that they buy into you like that. Do you know what I mean? You must be making so much change within their organisations for them to keep coming back, Zoe,
I hope so, yeah.
So we've talked about making things palatable, right? And I think we are still a little bit out of the way from when we can be fully 100% transparent about mental health or mental illness at work. So for someone who maybe is struggling in silence or wants to take that first step through discussing it in the workplace, how would you recommend going about that? You know what I mean? Where is this? What's the safe line to tread?
My advice is always, and I think I'd normally use this in the realms of OCD, because it's talking about generally it's quite taboo. The topics you're talking about are quite taboo, so you want to make sure that it's a safe space when you talk to. And I think this applies to a lot of disorders. Is just, I would always say to talk about it with someone as if you're talking about a friend first.
Okay,
being cool. My friend, I know someone who's got OCD, and did you know what this is OCD is about? And then they got these thoughts and this thoughts, and then gauge their reaction on that. And then when they have if they have oh, that's weird kind of reaction, then it's not a safe space to. But then the other way, if they're like, oh wow, yeah, no, or they say, I knew that, and then it kind of leaves you this open space to then be a bit more open about it.
Yeah.
I feel, but I think just telling one person is always just a first step.
Definitely.
Just find your community.
And I feel like whenever we got put together, I didn't even really know a lot of gay men, right, to be honest, or have close gay friends. And although we have a very virtual relationship in the Manpower group world.
This is the first time we've met.
Yeah, this is the first time we've met in person. But I found you being quite open made me feel more comfortable talking about things that were bothering me. And like you started off speaking like once a week, and obviously now we're more, I would say, we're friends, but I probably wouldn't have had that safe space before, you know what I mean? So even like today, I'm able to say to Zach, like something happened, like these two fellas, and I'm being really irrational here. Like my mind is racing, and I'm just being so strange. And Zach's able to be like, right, okay, you know, like wind it down a bit or something like that. But he is able to give that advice because he obviously gets it. You know, it's sometimes tough being a gay fella in your late 20s. You know, it's nice, birds of a feather flock together, I guess. But do you feel like, obviously, given what I've just said, do you feel like there is that support within work that you could get that? Or do you think you would need to seek it out?
I would have to see, I think you have to seek it out. I think that, you know, even in my, like, it's not always, I don't always want to be like, you should, like, if someone is in the office and they say, I'm so OCD, which people do, you're not always going to want to be in that position where you're like, you shouldn't say that to them, because it's awkward and it's kind of embarrassing to be like almost like the woke one, in quotation marks. But yeah, so I think that there's definitely places you can go, but sometimes right now, especially when it's like kind of outside the anxiety depression thing, it still does feel like you're a bit of an inconvenience.
Yeah. Because people can hear you, but they might not relate to you, and they might not see you. You know. And what about you, Zoe? Would you have anything to add?
I agree. I feel like you have to just try and find one person that you feel comfortable talking with, and that person doesn't have to be somebody in people or HR, although ultimately if your people or HR team aren't made up of at least one person that you feel that you can go and approach, then there's something going on with that setup. However, it can be a colleague, it can be a friend, it can be your boss, it can be your work bestie, but go and just have that conversation with them, tell them how you're feeling. And if you haven't got that person in work, then you can talk to somebody who's outside of that work who can just be that buffer. And then it's about seeking out those people within work that you feel you can eventually have those conversations with.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you think workplace culture is changing? Like, do you think that we are on sort of like an upwards trajectory and that businesses are becoming more receptive?
Yes and no. I feel that companies, for example, might just offer free counselling to people.
Yeah.
They see that as a bit of a tick box, where actually there might be a business that brings that service in, or that perk in, as they call it a perk.
Yeah.
However, the infrastructure of that business is not set up for anybody to be psychologically safe. Okay. So they might have high workloads, they might have untrained managers, they might have really difficult clients. There might not be a proper the team organization, for example. There isn't enough people within, there's not enough resource, which is causing people to have poor mental health. And then they're slapping free counselling on as a perk. And actually that doesn't work. You need to fix the infrastructure of the business. The business needs to be a psychologically safe place for everybody, and then absolutely people then can bring in these perks that, are really beneficial to some people. Sometimes they're not, though. But I think that we need to do a bit more work on the infrastructures before we then start thinking about adding all these additional parts on. And I feel that for some people within businesses, mental health is accessible, but there's also a lot of demographics that don't have access, don't feel that they have as much access as somebody else to be able to have that support within a business. So there's lots of people that we're still missing out. So I think we're getting there.
100%. And I want to go back to something that you touched on, Zach. Is it our job to educate our colleagues around mental health? And if we feel that we need to, how can we do it in a safe way?
Let me think. I think it is. Yeah, I think it is our responsibility. But I think as long as it's in a safe environment, some people don't always react best to critique. But I think that the way you approach it is just when someone says something, just to be like, oh, well, no, did you know? I think just come at come from a very compassionate being like, oh well, are you do you know what OCD actually is? Or like, oh, I've actually got a friend who's got OCD, or like I have a friend who's got severe depression, or a friend that's got schizophrenia. Even if you don't have a friend, I think there's always the friend vice is always just really helpful, I find. But I think that people want to learn and want to do better. I like to think the best of people, and I think that a lot of the time if you were to call someone out, they're not going to be like, oh, how dare you? They're going to be mortified at the fact that they've been saying the word wrong and want to learn. I think just people have the best intentions a lot of the time, I'd say.
Yeah. Okay. And what about setting boundaries? So what would you say is there things that are appropriate to share in the workplace? And are there some things that we probably should maybe speak to someone outside of work about?
I feel like there's two ways to approach like boundaries and mental health, because I think that both businesses and employees have a responsibility and an opportunity. So I feel that businesses have a responsibility to make sure that people aren't having prolonged stress in the workplace, that the workloads aren't consistently high.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have a responsibility to make sure that they're setting up that infrastructure so that people can be mentally healthy. And then I think they have the opportunity to be able to really support their team members with learning about mental health and improving their mental health. And then I think that it's also roles reversed on that, where employees have a responsibility to keep themselves as mentally healthy as they can, so they can show up to the workplace and do what they need. They're there to do. And they also have an opportunity within that workplace to lean on the resources that they have set up to make sure that they are improving their mental health even more. Yeah. So I think it works in those kind of categories.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
If you think about, like, for example, you might be going through a breakup, right? That isn't, unfortunately, your workplace's responsibility to help you through that, but they have an opportunity to be able to support you through that breakup in the workplace. And I think then if you think about how there might be a client or a project or maybe a colleague or a boss who is causing a lot of prolonged stress, who is not being not communicating in the healthiest way, we'll say, I think that then the business has a responsibility to support that person through that. But then that person has an opportunity to make sure that through this really busy period or through this client that is maybe quite stressful, that they're doing their part to look after themselves. They're making sure that, like, they're getting enough sleep. They're making sure that they are turning up to work in the best way that they can to be able to support themselves through that project.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. We're coming up to time. If there is one thing that you would like the listeners to take away from today's podcast, or if there's one last message, please feel free to share. I'm going to come to you first, Zoe.
Oh, I was hoping you would come to me second.
No.
What's one thing I would say? I feel like the workplace at the moment is quite a hard environment, and there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to develop, and there's pressure to do well, and you've got the economy, and you've got your own life, and you've got your family, and you've got your friends, then you've got a high workload and big targets, right?
Yeah, trying to do a good skincare routine and be a good friend and keep a good social life.
Trying to get your 8 hours in.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There's so much pressure on everybody at the moment, more pressure on certain people than others, right? But there's a lot of pressure. And I feel like we just need to give ourselves a bit of a break, give ourselves some grace. We're not going to get it all right. We don't need to get what we dream of tomorrow. Maybe we might get it in 5 years. Maybe we'll get it in 10 years, right? Like, just keep doing it at your pace. Give yourself some grace and make sure that you have fun at work, right?
Just a lasting comment from you. Come on.
So my go-to and my favorite thing that I always say is that everything is going to be okay just because it has to be. There's no other option really. So just if you're having a really rough time right now and you're feeling low, just remember you've been here before and you've got through it before, and you continually will get through it. So just that's it. Basically.
Okay. Now tell us about the marathon.
Oh yeah, I'm running the London Marathon April 27th for Centrepoint charity. So halfway through my training, I have some shin splints right now, so I'm taking a break. But very excited for it.
Yeah, and for our listeners, Centrepoint is Manpower Group in the UK's charity partner for this year. They do some amazing work, and we're very grateful to have Zack supporting. Where can our listeners follow you?
They can follow me at OCD Stigmatize. So OCD and then how do I say this? Like OCD Stigmatize. I'm terrible at like actually saying it.
We'll have it in the caption. So we'll have it in the caption. And yourself, Zoe?
You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn and TikTok, and it's Zoe Mallett, 2 L's, 2 T's. Can I do another little plug for City Days?
Yeah, of course you can. Go
on. So I've started this walking club. It's called City Days. It's a way to help people just connect with one another. Like, we know that people want in-person connection. We want to get people off their phones. We want to get people out of their houses, into green spaces. London gets a bit of a bad name sometimes. Gets a lot of bad press.
London is lonely. It's lonely. And I think what you're doing is helping.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I love that.
Keep going.
But I feel like, I mean, in terms of like London gets a bad press for like it, in terms of like the landscape and the actual city, when actually like London is one of the greenest cities in the world.
It's beautiful.
There are so many beautiful parks. So our mission is to just get people out of their houses, give people a natural community, and teach people when they are there how to connect with other people.
Love that. And
so fun.
If any of our listeners want to come, I'll be going to.
Yay!
Thank you so much, Zack and Zoe, for today's episode. Zack for being a really good friend, and Zoe just for being an all-round amazing person. You really inspire me with the things that you say and the way you articulate the work that you do.
Yeah, you're very, very articulate.
Yeah.
Do you know what? For a dyslexic, that actually like really means a lot.
Yeah. Honestly,
Thank you.
I need you back again. So
I'll be back anytime.
But yes, that's the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the People First podcast. As always, if you are in the market for a new role, please check out Brook Street online. There may just be a dream job waiting there for you. And please, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends or follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you, and see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.